Bildkonst idag, målning, konceptkonst, foto, video, nya uttryck, samtida konstnärer. Allt här i SVTs nya serie Format som inleder starkt med måleri på randen av obehag.
Goyas exekutionspatrull var politiskt sprängstoff i sin tid. Picassos Guernica, den blev politik på nytt när Irakkriget skulle diskuteras i FN. Det farliga kan vara lågmält fast med en djävulskudd. Eller giftigt, både i motiv och färg.
I Antwerpen är luften grå och det finns en gråhet också i Luc Tuymans målningar. Konstnären som med sina tvetydiga bilder betytt allra mest för 90-talets måleri.
The work is utterly silent. It will never talk back to you. And the explanations I give are just in order to complete, not the imagery, but to complete the backdrop of the imagery. Because I'm very well aware that it is just impossible to make sure that people will see the same things in the image as I saw in it, or to find the points of departure from which I made the imagery. It's just important for me to know what I am making. And it's also sometimes shocking to see that people that do not know what the image is about come very close in another way, from a different direction, from what the image actually virtually also means. But you go against the tabuization of the image itself. It's not so much the idea of censorship, but it's the idea to have the ability to address images that could be fairly inconceivable. There is actually the element of distrust, which is important, because we live in a society where, especially the media is made an emphasis upon the rendering of information, but it has become and reduced to a soundbite. And on the other hand, the media can be bought. So in that sense, they're very inadequate. So what can you believe? For example, the gas chamber, which is a highly metonymous painting, because without the title it would just be a cellar. But then again, when it was in use, it was also a sort of masked space. It was a space that was actually pretended to be a sort of shower room, but then wasn't. So there is already this. And that, together with this element of a painting or the painterly qualities of it, which also, of course, have a sort of tenderness and a sort of, let's say, they have a warmth, they have a temperature. And they to that point have a sort of aestheticism, and you are aestheticizing something which is cruel. It becomes a very ambivalent situation, but that exactly is what I think that art is all about. It's about a huge perversion. A lot of the real information is, especially in the Western societies, and others too, but in our extent maybe more, is extremely repressed. therefore also this sort of instigation to nearly investigate that, to go into that. And of course, that type of repression is not my repression solely. It's one that in that sense is then translated on the more cognitive level, so to speak. But still within a highly heightened form of subjectivity, because I think that's the only way to do it. Because as I said, I cannot propel a larger meaning onto somebody. It's just impossible. The hardest part when you work with representation, what are you going to represent? And in what way are you going to do that? And how blatant are you going to do that? And how complex it is going to be?
Luc Tuymans ger även bild åt de blinda fläckarna i modern belgisk historia. Moana Kitoko, vackre vite man, en fragmentarisk serie målningar om kolonialstyrets upplösning i det belgiska Kongo.
What is important to the entire body of the work is my own distrust against imagery, and especially the element of understatement. Because for me, an element like violence is not just the idea of the mutilation or showing the corpse or the blood or whatever. It's much more the moment just up front or after or whatever. But it's not so much the real placement of that or the sort of literal deduction or showing of that image. It goes further than that. Violence, in my sense, is something that can be psychological, that has a huge amount of other consequences, even also on a visual level. And in that sense, the banal is very important because it sort of like not only juxtaposes it, but could re-emphasize it. After a visit to Schwarzheide, which was one of the only labor camps of which there's still a little trace of in Germany. Out of a mixture of charcoal and something else, the prisoners who were detained there made a sort of like a strange bluish fluid substance of which they made drawings. Now, out of fear of being detected, they ripped off little pieces of these drawings and just distributed them among the other detainees. And after the war, when the survivors came together, you saw a lot of incomplete drawings. My wife and I, we were in the States during 9/11. And the idea of that attack, which was not only extremely symbolic, but extremely aesthetical in its appearance because of its precision. You could never do anything with an imagery like that. So it gave me the idea to make something about the idyllic, but then with a twist. And therefore I went to the lowest denominator within painting, which is the still life, which was hierarchically the least most important category. But blowing it up into an oversized size, it becomes like unconsumable. You cannot enter the imagery. I think that it's apolitical to sort of like fill in artworks with political meanings in terms of testimonies and whatever, because art is not about that. And that is actually an apolitical statement. And by doing something that looks like apolitical, it becomes extremely political. And that was the aim. And this was a point of resistance. I wanted to paint people actually, and right before that I paint models, like from the modeling world, like little figurines that you use by train modeling and so on. And I asked the psychoanalyst if they still produce these textbooks like for medicine students with photographs of actually patients in it, from which they had then to make a diagnosis. And he sent me one, which is called Diagnostische Blik. What I did is, by choosing the imagery out of that book, is change the eyes. The eyes would mostly look into the lens. I shifted them either to the right or the left side, so that they would not be able to make contact with the spectator. So there would be no empathy, there would be no sympathy, and there would also not be a sort of compassion statement from the spectator towards the imagery. And although this imagery was the most naturalistic one, it was the one that missed the real in the best way, because it became a trauma of its own imagery, because it was highly and completely symptomatic. It's kind of a very pessimistic consensus. It's not the consensus in terms of grand spiritual ideas, but it's a consensus with a clear element about, or a clear thought about what real imagery could be up to. The space is closed off. It's a sort of like end station within imagery.
Vietnamkriget rasar och på gatorna protesterar studenter och ungdomar. Ulrike Meinhof, Andreas Bader och Gudrun Enslin, de i kärnan i Rote Armee-fraktion, mer kända som Bader-Meinhof-gruppen. Deras mål är revolution, deras medel terror. Åren kring 1970 håller de Västtyskland i skräck. 1972 grips och fängslas kärnan i gruppen. Under 1977 hittas de döda i sina fängelseceller. Omständigheterna är oklara. Officiellt är det självmord. Gerhard Richter målade sviten om Bader-Meinhof-medlemmarnas död efter nyhetsbilder från tidningarna. Målningarna är kanske ett sorgarbete över den egna generationen. Kanske ett minnesmärke över den historiska förträngningen. Richter väljer inte sida. Den distanserade och allvarliga hållningen är kanske det mest provocerande i målningarna. Döden framstår som naken. Utan nåd, men med en skönhet också i de karga fängelseinteriörerna. I Richters målningar faller döden som ett försonande askregn över en grym och solkig verklighet.
Richter är en kameleont som målar i alla stilar. Jag vet inte vem han är eller var jag har honom. Den här mannen vet jag heller inget om. Men om onkel Rudi vet jag att han var nazist. Det är som Luc Tuymans, före Luc Tuymans. För mig är tomheten i bilderna redan ett tema. Landskap tomma och perfekta. Och så skickligheten. Fast skickligheten verkar heller inte betyda något. Väl målad kan han måla över den. Ingen målare förnekar måleriet som Gerhard Richter. Om dessa, återigen, är bilder om döden, då är det bildernas död lika mycket som vår egen. Louisiana i Danmark visar en sval presentation av vår tids svalaste målare. Det farliga får man leta efter. Kanske i ytornas giftiga skönhet. Kanske i de historier han avsiktligt antyder men aldrig berättar.
No, I mean, I think it's just one of those paintings. I mean, I did that, like, I think I did the first one in like 1998, and I think it was just like a fun idea. I mean, there's this plant that, you know, was like blooming. You know, these flowers are coming out, and like, instead of like you know, a flower, but there is a couple of flowers on the plants, but instead of like all the flowers, there's occasionally a cigarette also coming out instead. But it was just, you know, this, you know, an odd sort of mix, you know, between, you know, this thing that shouldn't be there, but on the plant. But you know, like the bittersweet quality too. I think, like, initially with this, like the cigarette, sort of like, it's, you know, it's sort of frowned upon. It's like it's a legal habit, but it's almost become like illegal. So I think that that appealed to me too. You know, that sort of like that bittersweet sort of quality. We're trying to make, and just like this, like, you know, the sort of the harmony of the directions of the cigarettes, where they're just sitting there, floating there. The majority of the paintings come, you know, from this my home environment. You know, the things that I have around me. So I mean, I think, like, all the objects in the paintings have to be something that I have a relationship with, or something something that I see every day, something that's familiar. So I think that's also why I tend to paint the same thing the same, maybe 3 or 4 objects again and again and again because I like that familiarity. I mean, I know exactly what I'm dealing with, and it feels comfortable too. I like to feel comfortable with what I'm painting. So this is my studio, or the room where I paint. I bought it in Chinatown in Sydney last year, and I painted it. And this is the little Chinese lantern. I think I call it paper mobile, or something, Chinese paper mobile. I simplified it, so I've taken the shape, but I've taken out these little figures. But I'd like to paint it again. I'd like to go back to this little lantern. But I think like with the pinks and purples, I think, it's like, I think initially what appealed to me with the when I first started doing the pink paintings that were predominantly pink was because it is such a problematic colour. I mean, it's difficult and it has so many, connotations and I think it has, I think that just, that the difficulty of using those colours was, what appealed to me, and then it went on to purple, which is sort of like the same sort of, I don't know, forbidden zone, but it works both ways because it's also something that, can potentially be very beautiful, which is what I strive after in my paintings, to do something that is as beautiful as I can possibly make it. So I think it can, it can be wonderful when it works, but at the same time it's got that, it's a little bit problematic, So, a little bit ghastly. I think the relationship maybe that, every parent has with their child, their son or their daughter, and it's like, which is, it's a very complicated thing, it's a very emotional thing. So I think that's there, and that lack of distance that I have to that person I'm painting. I can only really paint someone that I really care for, I think, so it has that loaded, they are loaded, those paintings, at least for me, and I think, they're paintings of a relationship. They're not just paintings of, people sleeping. I mean, it's people doing things. They're probably the most difficult paintings for me. The ones that take the longest, the ones I struggle most with, and the ones I feel most insecure about. And then in the end, the ones that I really want to keep. And I don't think if I can't come up with a good title, if I can't come up with a name for a painting that I like, that suits that painting, well then I won't part with that painting. And the words can establish so much around a painting, so that the words that belong to that painting have to be correct. They have to be right.
Det finns ingen målare i svenskt 1900-tal som är så svart och så undflyende som Dick Bengtsson. Den som vill ha konst som är behaglig och lätt att förstå har ingenting att hämta här. Varför har bergsvandrarna miniatyrer av modernismens klassiker på ryggarna? Och vad är det för mörker barnen lutar sig över? Folkhemmet möter det främmande. Dick Bengtsson använder och förstör bilder på samma gång. Från Monets katedral till Mondrians abstraktioner. Den fina konsten hamnar i sammanhang där det blir en del av något förtryckande och tvivelaktigt. Hitler och hans arkitekter beundrar drömköket. Och det är så fint och så välordnat. Det är som om ordningen själv blir hotfull och obehaglig. Makten och staten, förtrycket och fascismen. Fast så enkel är ändå inte Dick Bengtsson. Snarare verkar han vilja sabotera betraktarens slentrianmässiga intag av bilder.